Hi, Michael Chambers here again. About this is about safeguarding or safe environment. Similar issues across the Western world, let's say, or any part of the world. And I want to talk about training I've had and what I think is good and bad about safeguarding systems. Let me just put my light on. I'm going to try and slow down now because if I'm going to address people who are from other countries, I had lots of students who said I can understand English really, really well when I was teaching English, except for British people. And at first I thought, no, that's terrible. So surely it's the Americans that you must have greatest difficulty with. But then after about the 30th person told me the same thing, I had enough experience to understand why realized that I need to slow down. And it's hard for me to slow down when in full-on campaign mode. So maybe if you're struggling to understand anything I do, turn down the speed to like 50 or 75%. Anyway, I did some teaching assistant work last year and I had to go through all sorts of safeguarding training. And it was pretty boring, and everyone says the same. And I think one of the reasons it's boring is there's not enough human interest. Because if you really presented some awful, awful cases, not just the documents, but testimonies of survivors and families, and you had to sit down and really listen to them, your heart would break. And you think, yeah, when there's these things going on, we really need to do something. And so those of us who've been victims of Opus Dei abuse know what it's like, but those on the outside may not have watched videos or stories of our trauma, and so be emotionally detached from it. And yet they may still go into that whole sphere of work, safeguarding work. And of course, if they do care, they may well very deeply care about sexual abuse survivors or physical abuse survivors. And then people like me come along and say, well, what about us Opus Dei people? Lawyers like me, professionals who are being suffering emotional abuse. And if we're not in their remit and where they don't know our stories, they're going to become quite annoyed with us even. I think we've got a lot of other work to do with much more serious stuff. Okay. Well, of course, often the abuse stuff only comes out much later when people are older. Um, whereas the grooming starts young, if possible, from Opus Dei in Opus Dei centres and schools. So we can fall into a kind of sympathy void as well, not just a safeguarding void, but a sympathy void where people say, we can't help you. And privately, we don't care that much anyway because you don't deserve that care. What often comes across. Okay. And so, anyway, going back to training, I think so. This is the number one value, I think, of good safeguarding training, that it presents the real life stories in significant traumatic detail, but not overwhelming, of all the ranges of types of people that you might have to deal with in your job. Okay, whatever your remit is, just the types of people. And so that first of all, that weeds out people who are just bureaucrats who see safeguarding as a good way of making money. And they could easily just go into a state agency or something else. Because those people aren't the right people for that work. So no matter how well trained and how educated and management minded they are, and meticulous with their paperwork and conformities to standards, they're just the wrong people. Okay, we don't need people like that because at some point they're not going to do anything. Um, or because at some point at every point in somebody's job, your remit is challenged. The scope of your remit is challenged. And if it's about the question of safety of people, then you can't just let that go morally. And so that's the key point, really, for me, is that if you're aware of a safety issue, um, then you don't let go. You can't get it before the right people. Excuse me. Until you've got somebody who will take care of it. If you can't take care of it yourself, and that's why I've got to the point of whistleblowing because I've tried absolutely everything, every possible avenue, like many of us have, to get Opus Dei abuse in front of the authorities, and it's still going on, and it's still being overlooked. There's still this void. So whistleblowing is the only option. And you know what? if you do get training as a safeguarding officer or safe environment officer, you will, and you join an organization, you're going to get whistleblowing training. So you're going to understand when you can whistleblow, go through the internal processes first, then the external ones. And then if you do get sacked, you've got a paper trail or to back you up. And hopefully you also got access to lawyers from the company too. So so you've really got everything in place to make sure that remits don't stop people. But you know what? I found when I've I've dealt with a number of safeguarding issues, not just to do with Opus Dei, and it's such a waste of time. It really is, really incredible waste of time. It seems like people, the first thing they do is look, is it in our remit? And if it is, they say, no, sorry, we can't help. Maybe we reckon we pass it on to somebody. We recommend you contact this person. So, but you know what they haven't done is like picked up the phone to that person to say, look, we've got anonymously, we've got this issue. We're going to say to this person, we're going to pass it on. And then is it all right if we check back with you in a week or so to make sure that you've got the remit to deal with it so that we can then rest easy and we don't have to keep worrying because you know that you're professional, so you'll deal with it. Okay. Or we'll go back to if we don't hear back from the victim, we'll ask them again. You know, we won't let them go. We won't let them fall through the cracks. Okay. We won't just say it's not our job, try this person. Okay. Because that's not good enough, is it? We know we can't trust everybody that we don't know well to get on with stuff. So, and then when you've got a big circle of that going on and everybody doing the same, people just get pushed around from pillar to post, constantly being re-traumatized, presenting their issues again to a new person, new person, new person, and not getting anywhere. And very few people pick up the phone or say, email back saying, oh, let me just have a chat with you first. But you know who's good at doing that? Police are often good at doing that in England anyway, local police. You know, they kind of like get the size of you, see if you're a dodgy character or what you're saying comes across as genuine. You know, find out who they can contact. Because when you say I'm a policeman, I've been asked to investigate this, people think, oh God, all right, let's see what I can do, you know. And you can do a bit of that as a lawyer. I should have probably, you know, raised my lawyer credentials before. I'm not a practicing lawyer though. That's the issue with me. But I could have said I'm a former lawyer more often. But anyway, that's a lesson for me in future. Okay. So I have a law society reference number I can quote. So it gives me some authority as someone who's worked in law and understands to some extent legal professional standards, and will then will hopefully, you know, expect a certain level of service in return. Anyway, so the bottom line is safeguarding is number one about caring from your heart as a Christian or whatever, as anybody, as a normal person. And that means not letting anybody think, that means identifying clearly if there's somebody at risk and making sure that if you can't help them, somebody else does, and that they won't just run away or pass the buck again. And so that's to be the number one priority when for any safeguarding officer, not just tell me what the contract says, give me the training, and then tell me what I have to do to keep my job. Okay, because if that's the case, like with many other jobs, you're part of the problem, not part of the solution. You might be solving some problems, but probably even the people that you're dealing with who you can help, you know, you're going to make them sweat because you're going to force them through a very rigid procedure, and you might be able to help them better if you developed a personal rapport. So this is my strategy then. If you want to go into safeguarding, first of all, really go into the traumatic stories, okay, and see if you can take it. Can you take that shit? Okay. If you can't, then it's not for you, or not yet. Okay. Secondly, have you know, have that approach. I've got a new case. Let's let's send the message. Can I pick up the phone? See what we can do. Okay. Very early on, get that rapport. Okay. Then after that phone call, that meeting, then have a say that we've checked our remit and this is what we can do, what we can't do. So don't give them the remit excuse before you've really had a proper chat on the phone at least. Okay, to find out who else they've gone to first. I found people have said, we don't have the remit, but what about these people? You just pass it on to these people. And and those people have already told me they don't have the remit. Okay. And in this big safeguarding void in the Catholic Church in England anyway, they don't even the safeguarding officers don't know what each others are doing, in some ways. They might have some sense of Opus Dei isn't in our remit, but actually we know that it's in the bishop's remit because Opus Dei statutes give authority to the bishop under universal canon law. So actually the Baal people that are the problem, the bishops who are saying we can't act, when actually that's been a lie all the way through, because all the issues we have with Opus Dei are matters of universal canon law. And if all the bishops actually just applied it or implemented it, there would be no need for all people like us to go around endlessly harassing safeguarding officers. So it's the bishops that have done the dirty on us, and then they've referred us down to people. They've said, well, basically, the bishop's approach is we can't deal. That's not true, but we're going to refer you to people who might be able to deal that will deal with other safeguarding. And they tell us, no, we can't deal with it. We'll try other people. So the bishops have led us on a complete wild goose chase for decades and decades and decades. And it's never ending, is it? It's never ending. That's why we do need to get the whistleblowing, okay? And be firm about it. Kick some proverbial. I don't want to say any rude words to anybody. Okay. So so that's my approach. Thank you for listening to another one of my rants. I hope I wasn't too fast.